Hi, everyone. Good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are. I'm Jenny. This is a part of our third Survivor Summit from Asian Mental Health Project. We're so excited to have all of our amazing facilitators and speakers join us. I'm going to start off with a little introduction. This session is a conversation on identity and intimacy. So a little introduction about myself. My name is Jenny. I'm a part of the outreach team at Asian Mental Health Project. I started volunteering my time in 2021. I actually started as a participant in our stay and check-in sessions, which Emerald, one of our speakers, have facilitated for us in the past. So excited to have you back and excited for Irene and John Ling to join us. So without further ado, I'm going to pass that on and have the speakers introduce themselves, and then we'll get started with our session.
All right, my name is Emerald, like the gem. I know my kids like the gem. I always think better of myself, but I call myself the raw authentic therapist because I'm from the Bay and keep it hella raw, hella authentic, raw authentic. Collectivist healing because as a Filipina and an AAPI woman, I believe that we heal in community. I don't think it's an individual process. There's so much healing that can happen when there's like community solidarity and safety. I call myself the hope dealer. People be dealing things, but I deal hope and love, and an activist, an advocate, a mother, a wife, an eldest of, 5 sisters. And that's all important because it has all led me to this purpose. I am a survivor of child sexual abuse, teen rape, drug-induced sexual assaults, coercion, and just generational trauma, physical, emotional abuse, and violence in the bloodlines, which is, that's really what led me to uh, serving this specific group of people. My passion was ignited by my lived experience, and um, I I just feel like I'm in my element when I'm doing that. That's what I was created to be.
I can jump in. Hi, everyone. My name's Irene. I use they, she, aya pronouns. I'm a queer non-binary Latinx professional. I've been doing advocacy and prevention work for the past 8 years. Really resonate with what Emerald shared of having my own lived experiences of sexual violence, right? And really maybe our own personal experiences with friends, families as well, really influenced my work as a young college undergrad to start doing this work, and essentially became my professional career. I recently am now exploring to do more beyond advocacy, right? What does healing look like, especially with what Emerald mentioned of being in community with each other and belonging to multiple communities, what that looks like for each community within each other to heal and find support and essentially thrive with their life. So excited to be here.
Thank you to everyone. Hello, my name is Zhongling Wu. I use she, her pronouns. I'm on staff with Center for the Pacific Asian Family. We are a dual domestic violence and sexual assault agency. I am a child of immigrants. I grew up in the Bay Area. Hearing hella just took me back, Emerald. Thank you. And yes, in the work that we do, what is in our professional scope is also personal. Right? Many of us come from lived experiences and just learning more about what do we mean when we talk about sexual assault and harassment, realizing how much we originally had normalized is actually a violation of our personal physical sexual boundaries. So thank you everyone for being here.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. I'm really interested in diving into this topic. Thank you, everyone, for taking your time and being here. I know we kind of dived into this a little bit in the intros, but I would love to hear a little bit more about how you got into this work of supporting survivors, supporting survivor advocacy and activism.
I could start off for us. So I think I really got into this work intentionally. I mentioned it as a young college student. I was working at the Women's Resource Center on campus. It was my first job. and really starting to explore, right, maybe what women's rights were, what does empowerment look like, right? What does it mean to be a feminist after this transition, right, of maybe childhood, leaving high school and kind of moving into adulthood, what that looks like. Through my work there, I met our campus advocate on campus, and it was a new position, and she was starting a program for peers to teach preventative work, right? Do outreach on really what violence prevention looks like on campus communities. And so I volunteered, and really that's where I started to thrive. Started to learn that for my own experiences family members had, experiences even friends had, they had names, right? They had labels, right? There was actually ways for me now to communicate what happened and what I experienced. And I think through that, I became so passionate about my work because I finally felt maybe validated. I saw myself for who I was. And I think within that, maybe even my own healing, right, through that, and being in community with other survivors, and creating intentionally safe spaces for us to, bond, grow, teach, but also be there to intentionally support each other.
So my story actually began when I was 17. It was such a monumental period in my life because that's when I found that calling. And so within that age 17, 2002, I just aged myself, but that's fine because I love getting older, wiser, confident. But that year I, was assaulted by 4 different people, and violence was just so rampant in the home. And that was the first time that I got an insider scoop on not only what it looks like in the home, but then in the system. So that was the year that was in a 5150 psychiatric hold for 3 days. And they treated me like, they put the handcuffs and they escorted you into the 5150. I went into a children's shelter facility where the psychiatrist would give you 10 minutes of a consult. And I didn't know that that's what it was back in the day because you were 17, but you give 10 minutes and they try to extract the story as fast as you can. And you just felt like a number. I felt so raw and so vulnerable and so broken in that moment and so stigmatized, because within 10 minutes of talking to me, he said, okay, I'm going to diagnose you with, depression. I'll give you Celexa, and this is happening because you got molested by your uncle. And that is just, the lack of gentleness, love, and care sensitivity was not in those systems. And then you go into a group home inside a school where you just have a bunch of people that are coming from juvie, children's facilities, stepdad's house, and you put them all in a, in a house, and it's just going to wreak havoc. And so I knew at that point, like, I'm going to make it to the other side, even though I don't know what that looks like yet. But when I do, I'm going to do it different. And as a Filipino, that was really scary. What does that mean for a Filipino to go into mental health? That's just not what we do. And so I ran away from that calling. But eventually, when I was like, okay, I'm going to stop people pleasing, and I'm not going to be a lawyer or a business person or a tax person, as I was told to do, be from my father, I went into the calling that I felt was true to me. And so, similar to what Irene was saying, like, once I was in, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm in my element. So, I was part of YWCA, where, they're about like empowering women. And a lot of the focus is on domestic violence and sexual assaults and immigration. And, then going into Uplift Family Services, where it's just high acuity rate. I think it was called EMQ before, and now it's Pacific Clinics, but a lot of that is very high acuity, the suicidality, and just, Medi-Cal, people who are Medi-Cal, and then going to school systems, how was that navigated when survivors were to come forward? Every system was so different and had its different set of rules, but it was so eye-opening. And it was then that I realized, like, I don't really like how the systems are set up, and I think I've navigated them long enough. I think I just want to create my own. And just to give you an idea, like in the Bay Area, there are only 2 in-person groups for survivors. And that's just not okay. So I decided, you know what? The ones that I've attended didn't benefit me in the way that I want. When you go into a group or you go into a setting, you're like, oh, it's just not hitting right. It's just, this is not it. And you're trying to force it, and it's not. And so I just started making my own healing circles. And it's been such a beautiful part of the journey, being able to give them what I craved and I wanted so much in my healing journey. And so been doing that for the past couple of years in private practice.
Yeah. So my entry into this field was actually through kind of a parallel experience in the work that we do in how to support survivors and seeing domestic violence, sexual assault through the cultural lens. Growing up, my brother was diagnosed with autism. We were all children. My parents are still figuring this out. And as I got older, kind of realizing more and more just how culture and disability intersect. Where do we go for help? Where do we go for resources? And realizing the lack of in-language resources, support, the way that we don't talk about disability. We don't talk about what makes us different, can feel shameful. And so seeing this stigma around disability, around mental health and accessibility, and seeing a similar just hesitation to talk about sexual violence, about domestic violence, interpersonal violence in the home, and how trauma continues to impact us across generations. So, like, where do people go for help? What are the words that we use to even describe our experiences? So I came to this through kind of a parallel experience, and then more and more realizing just how much everything intersects, and the rates of sexual violence towards people living with disability are far greater. And people are often dismissed, because of other facets of who they are, and the way that we don't value disabled bodies, the way that people are dismissed because they don't speak the language, because we look and people who are out there sharing their stories don't look like us. And so just seeing all of the overlaps and intersections, and thinking more and more, how do we provide these spaces to support people as their whole selves across all of the different facets of their identities.
Yeah, thank you so much, everyone. I think I resonated a lot with what you were saying about, growing up in different cultures, like as someone who is an immigrant, someone who moved to the United States and lived with my parents that primarily speak Cantonese. Like, it was really hard to discuss really difficult topics where, like, I wouldn't even have, the language that I would need to express something in the same way that I would in English. And so there are definitely so many nuances in different cultures. And so I'm excited to jump into our conversation on identity and intimacy. I think when I, read and hear identity and intimacy, like, that can mean so many different things, and that's beautiful. It's something that I initially thought, I was like, oh, intimacy, like, that's physical, but there are so many types of intimacy. And along with identity, like, culture is one. There are so many other parts that make us up, that we're not identified by just one thing, right? And so, yeah, I would love to dive into that. And my first question would be, how does culture intersect with intimacy and relationships?
I mean, I'll speak to the Filipinx, API lens. Intimacy, relationship, and sex, they're not talked about. They're taboo. There is a lot of shame around it. There is a lot of beliefs that are just harmful, like, hey, keep it in the family, don't say anything, saving face, don't bring shame to the family, don't talk about your personal things because it's none of anybody's business. And to respect. So respect means don't talk back, obey, and just listen. Do not talk back. And so when you grow up with those beliefs, then even if you have the words to say, it is so terrifying to let them come out of your mouth, because it just feels like, oh my gosh, that's so ingrained, like, that's disrespectful, that's dishonoring. And so what was crazy to me, because I was researching, like, it broke my heart to know that within the Philippines, my motherland, that it's one of the highest of sex trafficking within children. Intimate partner violence, violence within the home, infidelity, multiple families. Like, this is such a it's such a common thing that happens. And when I look at it, like, we don't talk about these things. We're not talking, we're not giving, we're not equipping the generations, the younger generations, to have healthy relationships, to have body autonomy, to know what the heck consent means. I asked my mom, like, I think a few months ago, Mom, what about, I was trying to teach her about boundaries. She's like, boundaries, what boundaries? And so we don't know what boundaries are, or that even if that's permissible, we don't know what red or green flags are. So then if the younger generations are not even equipped for those things, then you wonder why, like, wow, there's a lot of generational patterns and traumas that just get passed down through the bloodline. And so in the work that I do with healing circles, and most of the people that I serve are survivors. I do see it. It's not just an isolated incident. You see it kind of sprinkled in the family tree, and the ones that didn't speak up, that got it further along, and then you wonder why the grandchildren are experiencing the same thing. And so it's just it's not talked about. Then on the other piece is just the fetishizations and the objectifications. And I know that within Asian cultures there's over 48, correct me if I'm wrong, 48 different countries, but we're fetishized. We look at our history, like, what labels do we get? ABG, Asian baby girl, comfort women, happy endings. Like, they're not honorable labels, and people wonder why, like, these things happen.
I resonate so much with everything that you just said. There's that long history from the military industrial complex and colonialization, imperialization, how Asian women have been fetishized, in particular, and we still hear the impact. It's in the stereotypes, it's in the movie tropes, right? Of this is how Asians, in particular Asian women, are perceived. Asian men have a whole other set of stereotypes attached, and often like more feminized or asexual or whatever else. And so like the experience of culture and the stereotypes that attach, the associations are also very associated with gender and our experience and expression of gender. And thank you, Jenny, in acknowledging like intimacy takes all forms outside of like romantic and sexual. Of intimacy is that closeness. Intimacy happens when we feel safe enough to choose vulnerability. And this is a choice that we make when we trust somebody, when we disclose something, to tell someone, hey, this happened to me. I don't know how I'm feeling about it. I really need to talk to you. And recognizing romantic and platonic love, family by blood, blended families, family by choice, where sex and sexuality is heavily influenced by culture in the words that we use. How do we talk about it? What are the roles of men and women and within family, within marriage, whether or not we even talk about other gender identities across the spectrum, and do we have words for those? And so, culture impacts who do we go to for information, right? And what are the norms and values? What are the conversations we had about sex or dating? Possibly nothing, right? In many Asian families, we did not get to talk about sex. And the main conversation was don't date, right? Just don't date. You don't have time for that. And so if somebody were dating and something happened, their partner pressured them to do something they didn't want to do, well, I can't talk to my parents, right? Because the whole message that I got was don't date. So I'm just going to get in trouble because I wasn't supposed to be dating in the first place. And this causes just further isolation from people who could be part of our support network, but now I don't feel safe to come to this person because I was already told, right? I'm not supposed to be dating.
Yeah, really resonating with what you both shared and your experiences of even myself growing up in a very traditional Latino household, very Catholic, right? These were not conversations we were having or encouraged to have. And even Jenny, how you phrased the question around intimacy, right? Being vulnerable, expressing feelings, right? That was not even encouraged at all. in our household growing up. I think for my own experiences, I was the eldest sibling of a single parent, and I didn't have time to be a child. I didn't have time or have space to have feelings because I had to be essentially that other parent, raise my siblings as my mom went out to work. And I think that shaped intimacy of vulnerability is not something that is shared, and really shameful in that, even growing up. And I think it's interesting of even the intersections of my other identity, right, of being queer myself, and finally finding that community in college, seeing intimacy in a whole different way, where folks are expressive, right? We can express intimacy, even if it's platonic, right, with hugs and kisses or being vulnerable, sharing our experiences. And I think growing up, being in such a shameful environment, right? And then immediately into that transition into adulthood and finding a different community, right? That is open to intimacy, that I belong to, right? That validates me. But at the same time, recognizing, okay, there's still some harmful patterns here. And it reminds me of, the book, what is it called? The Revolution Starts at Home, right? We're even in our own communities, right? We're being harmed by other folks. And at the same time, we're trying to navigate adulthood as ourselves, right? But also navigate, how can we also intentionally create a healthier community? How can I express this a little bit better so we can understand each other? Or even how do we conflict resolve, right? Because I know in my family growing up, we had conflict, no one's talking, or my parents are right? No question above that. And I think too, sometimes the media we're exposed to, right? Growing up, we all have such different experiences. And I often think of maybe generationally, right? Culturally, what was going on? What was that conversation? Very similarly, my parents were not having conversations as young children, right? Growing up around sex or healthy conversations or consent, right? Not having the language around that. And now maybe where I'm seeing my younger siblings, right? Gen Z, having language for a lot of things and being able to express a multitude of their own experiences. So I think it's interesting to even see that too, generationally, what we're seeing in this conversation.
Yeah, thank you so much for your insights. I really resonated a lot with everything that you all were saying. Like, you know, I've never had the sex talk with my parents, and then all of a sudden they're like, "When are you having kids?" Like, how did we go from, we don't talk about that kind of stuff to like, "Oh, when are you gonna settle down?" and blah blah blah. And I'm like, I'm just kind of doing me right now. And definitely it's hard to navigate that. And it can be also so beautiful, like with what you were saying, Irene, about how intimacy can be in platonic relationships. Like, it's not just romantic, it's not just sexual. It can be, it's so freeing to see and be in community with folks that are expressive, and you feel safe enough to choose vulnerability. I loved when you say that. That was so powerful to me. Well, yeah, thank you guys for sharing that. And what does it look like to honor you and your partner's identity? So like bringing in a partner into the picture. We talked a little bit more about like family, but what does it look like to honor you and your partner's identity, perhaps past or ongoing traumas and mental health challenges? Because I know that's not a easy thing to dissect, and it's very nuanced. It's like a onion, so many layers to peel.
This tends to be like the number one topic when couples come to me. Like, how do you navigate that when, let's say, both partners are survivors? Because it happens across genders. Even my husband, we're both survivors. And it's really tricky. But it comes down to safety, emotional, physical, sexual safety. How safe is it? How safe are you guys creating it that it's okay to share your stories? And every survivor has to decide for themselves. That's another question that comes up during healing circles. Should I tell them? When would be the right time to tell them? How do I tell them? How many details do I tell them? And it really is up to your, what you're comfortable and what you're ready for. Is it safe enough in this interaction, in this relationship with your partner, to talk about what's happening with, mental health, physical health, because there's even physical health things that could be going on that's going to hinder, intimacy. And is it comfortable enough to talk about that? So then that way, when you enter into that space where you're creating a physical and emotional intimacy when you're having sex, that you guys can do it in a way like, hey, we're both going to have fun. This is an embodied, enjoyable, pleasurable, juicy experience that both of us, or that we get to have. Is it safe to talk about your needs, your boundaries, your desires? What do you like? What do you don't? What do you like? What do you don't like? And when you have all of that knowledge, and you create that level of safety, it's are both partners going to be understanding and being aware of where they're at in their healing journey? Because for me, I've been out of the box. Like, I have been doing this healing journey, but my partner is at a different point. So then for me, I need to respect and not try to pull them out of the box and like, well, just be out with the story and just like, here's the labels and here's the language. Like, no, let's let them grow and heal at their own pace. And I had to learn that the hard way, because I'm just out of control sometimes, and to have ground rules and a framework on how to bring up sensitive topics, because sometimes when you go into something, you have something in your mind and there's no framework, then you just go on all sorts of tangents. And now both people are, so escalated. There's no exit plan, and you don't know how long this conversation is going to have. So I like to keep it simple: peace circles or restorative justice circles. But like, I feel I need, and if there's anything to apologize for, because accountability is so important, apologize, take accountability, and like, what are we going to do moving forward? And then to have, and this was a hard piece as well, like, do they have the skills to validate, to hold space, to have empathy, to be humble? And so when you put in all those factors into a relationship, which is not something that's going to come in overnight, that's like really over time. Trust is built over time. And so that's how we can honor each other and say, like, let's say one person wants to be intimate, like, babe, I really can't. I had a long day and my body's really aching. And to be honest with you, I haven't been to the stretch lab and I'm getting activated. I saw a movie at school and I'm really activated and I'm still coming down from it. Like, okay, all right, well, let's just go on the couch then. So it's that level of safety versus, well, I should do this, so I'm going to do this. And then you're dissociating, you're checked out. And then that's just re-triggering, bringing on more trauma and triggers. So it's safety, physical, emotional, and sexual safety.
I'm not even sure what else to add to that. That was such a great response. And so all encompassing that, yes, like recognizing where we are in the journey, we're going to be in different places. How do we just take that pause and breathe and listen to each other and have a conversation where we're not so activated? Like, there are things that we can do in the moment when we're getting triggered. Okay, maybe we need some space and let's talk about it afterwards, and of understanding where we come from, what's coming up for me. And so in learning about each other's triggers, where for many people, like, even if, let's say, the trauma and abuse happened some time ago, I'm away from it now in a new relationship, and now a lot of memories are coming back up. So there is an exploration, even knowing what are my triggers, because some of it we might be able to anticipate. Sometimes we don't know until it happens. And then, okay, a lot of feelings coming up. What do I do to take care of myself in the moment? And then, how do we express what we need in the moment afterwards to feel more grounded, to feel secure, to feel safe, and having that further conversation of, this is how I feel supported. And coming from different experiences, and some people are maybe set off by angry expression or loud noises. These are things that take me back to a time when really scary things happened. And sometimes, again, our triggers may not be immediately obvious until we're in that moment, or understanding from our partners, friends, what does this mean for me? In something like a more neutral expression, coming from a place of trauma, that neutral or ambiguous expression situation might be read as more dangerous, right? And that's a trauma response. It was something that helped keep me safe a while ago. Now, maybe it's not the most adaptive, but there's a reason that reaction happens. It came from somewhere. And so if it's not addressed in the larger pattern, so how do I say, in the moment, right, we pause, take a break if we need to. And how do we have that conversation, take a step back and talk about this larger pattern rather than the ongoing back and forth of, are you mad at me? No. Are you mad at me? No. Are you mad at me? Well, okay, now I sort of am. Because we're now talking about the larger picture of this is what happens, this is how I respond, and here's what I need. And so how do we have that conversation? How do we come up with the words and to express, because of what I've been through, because of my experiences, I get really nervous when I see a blank face, right? And it's reassuring to me when I hear this from you. It's this is how I can take care of myself in the moment. This is what will be helpful from my partner, and so starting to recognize what's coming up, naming it, and expressing what do we need from the people around us.
I think you both summed it up so well. I think ultimately safety as, a survivor, even when we're dating other survivors or with other survivors as well. And everything of what y'all said, understanding, right, where we are at each other's own healing journey. I really resonate with, sometimes we're so caught up in our healing journey and we see potential maybe because of where we're at, or we, maybe want to resonate with folks. So you can do this. We want to encourage you to get there. And I know I found myself, right, working in this field, sometimes maybe being a little too, right, invested, right, and needing to be more understanding that my partners are at their own healing journey, wherever they might be in life, right, and I have to understand and respect that. And that might even come with sometimes acknowledging maybe our own boundaries too, right? Okay, I can't do this, right? I have to trust, right, and honor that you're on your own journey, and I'm here just to listen and support you. Definitely, I think I'm huge on understanding, right, along with what y'all said of building trust and communication and acknowledging differences in our healing journey. But if we don't have understanding in that, right, we all have such unique experiences. We might have responded differently, right? We might have maybe overcame it differently. We might even be at a different point. But if I can at least understand, okay, I'm trying to meet you where you're at, or just understand where we're coming from, then all the communication might not be as useful, and my experiences as well. And so I think just honoring also those valid check-ins of what everyone was saying, being able to vocalize, okay, what's going on, or even recognizing ourselves, okay, I didn't maybe address this fully, maybe I'm being a little avoidant, right? Maybe that's making me a little more anxious. And I think too, each partner is going to be so different from each other, right? Recognizing and remembering if we're, maybe dating a different person moving forward, or dating multiple partners at some times, right? That this is going to look so differently with each relationship as well, or even platonically, right? With our own platonic relationships.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think understanding that it's not linear and that everyone's going at their own pace is so important, because I think as a survivor myself, sometimes I think I'm really happy with where I am in my journey, and I'm grown so much, and there's hope and all of that, and then there's times where it just feels like I'm broken, and my insecurities come back, and it's just not a great feeling, not a great reminder of where I am, but knowing that it isn't linear. So when you've encountered working with survivors who've developed the belief that they are broken, and maybe that's not all the time, right, but just enough where it creeps back in and it totally affects your day to life. I express fears of being unable to be in a relationship again, or be able to have a positive sex life. How have you approached these types of concerns?
I think for me, it's always, I'm a big feeler. I think as someone who has, been shamed with emotions and vulnerability, sometimes it's okay to be honest with ourselves, right? And admit our feelings and feel that feeling if that's what we need to feel, whether that be broken, lost, misunderstood, not as ourselves, right? And there's truth to that, right? Because we had an experience, unfortunately, it was out of our control, but it happened to us. And of course, we're going to have multiple feelings, right? Multiple emotions, even at different points, or even years, right, into this journey itself. And I think it's okay to feel that. Right. Some of us maybe don't want to, and that's okay as well. How we cope, right, is really that initial tool that we're using. And I don't think there's any shame, or there should be any shame, right, to how we're feeling at that second. And so I'm a big feeler for feeling that. It's okay to feel that. It's okay to acknowledge that. And then really moving forward into what I like sharing is you get to decide your healing journey, right? If we want to feel those feelings and stay in them, that's okay. Sometimes it's hard to move out of those feelings. And I think validating that too, as myself being a survivor and how I coped in some ways, right? Maybe it's not something a professional, was recommending, or maybe telling me actively to avoid, right? These unhealthy coping skills. But sometimes in that moment, right after trauma, those are the only things we can resort to. And I think as long as we're not harming others, right? Okay, what else can I do in this healing journey? And Jenny, to bounce off what you're saying, what you mentioned earlier, it not being linear, acknowledging, right, that healing, we often imagine this, right? I think just is just a societal norm of we imagine healing, getting help, getting better as only going up, as only, right, getting better. Things are going to look great. And really, I describe it as a roller coaster. It's going to go up, down. The ride might stop. We might go backwards. You might lose your phone on the ride, right? I don't know how long the ride lasts. Also, I'm scared of heights, so this is not exciting. And so, acknowledging that, right? And acknowledging too, I can't give you a timeline, right? I'm here to support you. I can't tell you what to do, when things are going to get better. And if I could, I would. And I think then we would be able to live, right, in this utopian world where survivors don't exist. But we don't, right? This is the reality, and how we cope with it moving forward in our own journeys is okay, because we're all such different people. We're going to cope so differently. And I think as long as we, aim right on just how we can continue to support ourselves, even if that means putting a pause to things, right? Like I said, sometimes the ride stops, but ultimately there's an end, right? There's an end to that ride. And I think we were talking about this a little bit earlier too. Sometimes that might even look like when we finally get beyond to maybe feeling broken in relationships, right? Or unable to have a positive sex life. Right, what does pleasure look like, right? What does self look like? What do these healthy relationships I keep hearing about look like? And ultimately, right, getting to cultivate those, getting in control, right, of what are my wants and needs, what are my likes, and being maybe intentional in those types of relationships too can even be part of that healing journey.
Yeah, thank you so much. I am also a big feeler, so you are seen.
Um, so my bio, all those lived experiences are on my bio. That is why a lot of the survivors gravitate, and most of the people I serve are survivors. And so by the time they come to me, they're just in that ready stage. And there is not really much of a tiptoeing, because at the point that they come, like, I'm tired. I'm so tired. I'm so tired of feeling this way. I'm so tired of feeling like the victim, even though I'm not the victim. I'm so tired. I'm just exhausted. I just want to have a normal day. Can I just walk down the street and walk my dog without feeling so activated all the time? And so I don't know. I created my own, like, my love offering to them, and which was these healing circles. And I'm like, well, what would make sense? So I made these 12 weeks, healing circles, like, for the first week, where you get to reimagine. And even though that's scary, like, oh my gosh, I have permission to dream. Like, I can have a dream. I can dream outside of just surviving life. And that was the whole thing. Like, I'm so tired of providers out there. They're just teaching us how to diagnose and manage the symptoms and decrease not feeling so activated as fuck. Like, that's not living, man. That's not living. It makes me so livid. And so to reimagine and dream with other people, because maybe something that person across the room said from you is going to make you feel like, I'm going to do that. Like, you get to, you're going to do a business. You're going to go on that dating site. You're going to go to school. You're going to travel outside your city, outside of the state, outside of the country. Oh my gosh. And so you kind of, you getting people comfortable, reimagining that together. Like, what would life be like? And then the second week, okay, it's a little bit tougher knowing what are the impacts, trauma, because it doesn't just impact the bedroom. No, it doesn't. It impacts your level of safety. Just the minute I walk out of the door, like, I'm not just like nonchalantly just obliviously walking around. Like, I do have a level of way that I carry myself, not in a hyper vigilant way, just awareness. And so, we look at, you know, how has it shown up? Like, oh my gosh, digestion, skin issues, chronic pain, just the red flags don't pop in my body. And then I wonder why I'm recycling into the same relationships, the same dangerous situations, because it doesn't alert me anymore, or it's so on high alert that I am scared to leave my house. I'm scared to even step out of my comfort zone. And so we look at all the different ways that it can impact you, in the workspace, at school, and then third week, healing in our bodies, because just because you tell a story and you could regurgitate all the details to someone over and over again and still feel so activated. So healing in the body is so crucial. Like, your nervous system, no, how can we start to release it? And it is like I was telling you guys before we started, like, like somatic shakes, and like, noticing when you are hyperventilating and kind of observing, like, what does my body need right now? Not, oh my gosh, something's wrong with me. I hate this. How come I'm being so triggered all the time? Like, rather than that, like, well, hey, my body is telling me something. Like, what does it need right now? And to give yourself the gift of, giving you what it needs, and then healing in the mind, because we know, like, those tormenting thoughts will come. Like, it's not safe. This is a dangerous world. I can't trust that person. And so starting to kind of come out, well, what do I do? How can I combat it? What can I do to start to create those safe spaces within, my chosen family? Because sometimes your biofam is just not it. And sometimes you need to create yourself a chosen family until they can be safe for you, and to create those level of safety and friendships in your workspace where it's not, oh my gosh, I'm hyper vigilant trying to navigate the world. Like, hey, I get to create that level of safety, and I get to choose who is in proximity to me, who is close to me, how much access people have to me, healing in the minds, then owning your story. I know this is a really painful part, but sometimes writing it all down, all the details, a lot of the times it's like, wow, this is the first time I'm acknowledging for myself this happened. Like, I'm so terrified to talk about it. But there's just something that happens sometimes when you write it out, and then it invigorates other memories of, other things that have happened in your life. Like, hey, that wasn't okay. That was a boundary crossing. That was a violation right there. Right. And then to share it in a space that is affirming and safe, where you can, within trauma work, rather than living in those past cycles of trauma, you get to recreate new memories. And so, like, I love to create that safe space where we're in a circle, we're drinking tea, we got some squishmallows, we're in our comfy pajamas, right? And we're listening to other stories, we're crying with each other, we're cursing the perpetrators out loud. And, just like, it's just nice to be able to do that around people, like, wow, these people get me. And then justice and liberation. Not everybody is going to embark on the civil or the criminal justice system, because those systems are really messed. I mean, I'm still navigating the justice system myself. Like, my uncle is still in jail and still navigating that, but then every survivor has to decide for themselves, like, what does that look for me? Like, do I want monetary gain so that I can get, hey, money to get relocated for security cameras for these services that I'm having to engage in because of what happened? Or, would I like to, I understand the emotional baggage that comes with navigating the criminal justice system and all the steps, but I want to do it for me because I, I want to do it. I want that person behind bars, and I'm just going to take that chance. But then still letting them know, like, out of 1,000 survivors, only 5 will be persecuted and put into jail, and letting them know that. And so then that way they can make that informed choice, and kind of empowering them on how to prep for when you talk to the police, when you talk to the detective. And so whether they choose to do it or not, at least they'll have those tools, so that if someone comes up to them, they go, "Hey, Irene, like, this thing happened to me. I don't know what to do. And I'm too terrified to, like, Google it up," that you would be able to give that, information to them, and then we have, of course, on consent and boundaries. Like, when I first started doing these healing circles, I just went into boundaries thinking like everybody knew what a boundary was, until I got humbled and they're like, "Excuse me, what's a boundary?" And so I'm like, I had to backtrack that up and just, really get to dive into that. Like, how do I make boundaries around my time, my energy, my access, my space, the people, and then family tree. We talked about generational patterns, like looking at really dissecting and exploring like what is in the bloodline. And rather than, okay, maybe it's such a beautiful and nice thing to say, like, I'm going to be the change maker, I'm going to be difference maker, I'm going to be the bloodline breaker. But it is lonely being that, because then, it's sometimes it's you that's the one, like, hey, we're going starting with me, I'm going to start expressing myself. Starting with me, mental health is not going to be a stigma. Starting with me, I'm going to learn to work through conflict. Starting with me, I get to choose who I get in relationship with versus being forced and guilted and manipulated into it, and then really looking at the support tribes. Okay, hey, these might be your people, but like, do they empower you? Do they energize you? Do they uplift you? Are you growing or healing in some way or form? And so, or if they're not, hey, I don't. They bring me down. It's a crab mentality. I feel like I'm being dragged down. Okay, well then how can we start to look for people that you would like in your circle and start to cultivate that community, and then exploring our journey, deconstructing, you know, rom- romantic relationships and sex. Okay, what did you hear from your school, your peers, the culture, your family, your upbringing, movies, pornography, religion, spirituality, like just constructing all of that. And then, okay, well, what do I believe about relationships? What do I need? What do I want sex to be like? And for some people, it's like, you know what? I don't want to be an object. I don't want to feel like I'm a tool. I don't want to feel like I have to dissociate. I want it to be, I want to feel special. I want to feel sacred. I want to feel like I'm having fun. I'm enjoying it. So we start to reimagine what relationships and what sex looks like. And then, start to kind of practice, like, well, what would it be like to actually be in your body when it comes to intimacy, embodied intimacy? I want to right throw that out, like, what's that? I've never had that in my life. And so what would that even look like? And then of course the celebration. So for me, like, that's my approach. It is these healings, whether they go into these healing circles or one-on-one, that's pretty much the process that I bring them through. And like Irene said, like, it's a roller coaster, because they can go through it and I tell them, like, hey, just because you go through the 12 weeks doesn't mean, like, all right, I'm healed, I did it, I'm done. Like, no, it's a process, baby. Like, even after the 12 weeks, it's a process.
There was so much wisdom that was dropped between both of you. Really appreciate, Irene, when you said just feeling, just let yourself feel what's coming up, and let's recognize it's so easy to want to just jump into reassurances, right? It's going to be okay. It's fine. Let's just sit with the feelings and recognize what's coming up, and start with where somebody is at. And yes, it is a process. There's good days and bad days. It's all okay. And to honor the coping strategies that brought you here. So often we're hard on ourselves for somehow doing healing wrong. And we paint ourselves into a corner because I should be a certain way. Like, if we're calling yourself broken or in need of healing, like, something is wrong. I'm doing this wrong somehow. It's really easy to get caught up in that, and shame compounds, right? If I'm feeling sad or down and somebody says you shouldn't feel that way, great, now I feel sad about being sad. And it is a vicious cycle. So in the conversations that we have, I end up saying a lot, like, that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense, given what you've shared, given what you've experienced, the way that you're responding to the situation now, given like how you react to things day to day, it makes sense. You know, and we can be really hard on ourselves for coping in ways that we think are bad or unhealthy. And, you know, those coping strategies served a purpose. If we're in a place now where we can stop and reevaluate, and you know what, maybe this method of coping isn't serving me and I want to explore new ones, great. And it was your former coping strategies that got you to that point. You know, so you can make different choices moving forward, and let's honor that your coping strategies got you here. You know, and to just hold yourself, your coping strategies, your needs, just with compassion. And you know, moving forward, you can decide to do things differently, and just to honor yourself and your process of getting here. You know, and to recognize, like, what is, like, who am I? What do I want? What is pleasure for me? I really appreciate the questions that you're bringing up, Emerald, where especially for female sexuality, we tend to pathologize and judge female sexuality in any direction, in any form of expression. Like, we will use words like nympho or frigid, right? Slut or a tease. There are so many ways to criticize female sexuality and expression, no matter what this woman happens to be doing or how they're acting. And the way that we talk about sex and sexuality tends to be in service of keeping the partner happy. So it's not even like my sexuality, it's how do I please my partner? And so how do we reframe this conversation to what we ourselves want? What does pleasure look like? What does intimacy look like? And this could be romantic and sexual relationships, platonic, friendships, and you're recognizing sexuality across the entire spectrum, where asexuality is a whole other spectrum of sexual identity. Some people are aromantic, asexual, demisexual. Asexual does not mean broken, right? This is a whole other range and just ways that we are different, and the sheer diversity across sexual orientations and expression, and how we are in relationship with each other. You know, so these are, there's no one normal, there is no one like way of being or expressing. And so how do we get in touch with who we are ourselves and not what I think I'm supposed to be? You know, what are the messages that we get around us? Again, what Emerald was saying with TV, porn, media, stereotypes, racialized ideas of like who a certain group of people are or act like. You know, how do we cut through the noise? And instead of all of these images imposed on us of who we're supposed to be, who am I really?
Yeah, thank you so much. So much wisdom was dropped here. I think it's, when we think about what does intimacy look like, right? I think it's important to have a toolkit so that survivors can develop and cultivate safety and healthy love and intimate moments that they do deserve to have. And so this brings me to my last question. What are some ways to build trust within intimate moments?
This has to be the hardest part of my journey. I think I was talking to, man, I was just so desperate, like for all the, I was buying all the books and all the classes and asking all the therapists. Man, this is so hard. But I just start to, build it up over time. I like to make it fun, because when it's just tense and both, like, oh, I'm afraid to ask because I don't want to dishonor their boundaries and make them feel bad or have pressure. And then the other one is like, oh, I'm not going to initiate because I really don't want it because I'm not ready. And so I try to find different ways. How can we make it fun so it's not like this awkward, tense, forced thing that needs to happen? And so I use a lot of crayons and drawings. And so like the gingerbread person, like, you bust out the crayons and like, okay, what are the red zones? And maybe the red and yellow and green zones might change over time. Like, because then you give each other the language. It's like, here's the parts of my body I just red. I don't feel comfortable. Please, I don't feel comfortable right now to touch them. Yellow, maybe let's talk about it. It depends on the day. Green, yes, I like it. Do it more. That's, and then to even give in more language to that, like I like that, to be stroked, to be massaged, to be coddled, to be caressed. But I like to use drawing. I think you're talking about like, what do you find pleasurable or desirable? I also use red, yellow, green, like the inventory. Okay, well, what are you down to try? Green zone. What are the things that you've been curious about, but you were like kind of like scared or feeling of being judged, but just put it down. So then that way both of you can compare notes. Yellow, like, okay, well, maybe down to do these things in the future. Red, absolutely not. Hey, this is a trigger zone because of past experiences, or just this is just something I don't want to do. Right. Looking at a trigger plan. Okay, kind of identifying like what are all my triggers and what are the different ways that I can pause or stop. For me, I'm very like sometimes like stop, or some people use a word. And then a plan, like if you need to pause and like, babe, I'm getting triggered right now. I just need to get a drink of water, then we'll come back. Or is the plan like, I just want to stop. Can we just watch a movie instead and cuddle? Please, like find ways that you can bring get engaged afterwards. And it doesn't mean like I'm going to engage into sex. It could mean like I need to pause and just let's try again next time. Or I just need a breather and then we could try again. Or depending on what you need, if you tend to be the person like, nope, I'm not going to do it. You're just aversive to it. Like with baby steps, then you start to see like, okay, how can I make baby steps in a safe way that I can start to re-engage in intimacy again versus like, I'm not going to do it. I'm anxious. I'm not ready. I can't do it. Then you're going to be stuck there. And so you do it in increments over time. Or if you tend to be the person to just like dissociate, check out and do it, then okay, maybe this is the time for you to like, hey, pause. I'm going to communicate what I need. And then, try to do something different and then execute on that plan. I'll make a little menu. I don't know if you guys have Canva, but they make cute little PowerPoints and visuals, but like you can make a little like menu of, cuddle, kiss, tickle, just make little cute little non-sexual activities on there. So then that way it can be like a fun game. How can we make this fun so it's not so tense? You could put little things on there like Eskimo kisses, massages, a slow dance, you could be silly and play games. You could put little cute little dates on there and see if it's so terrifying to ask or to talk about it, then okay, let's make a little cute little menu. you know um I know that during intimacy, I realized like, gosh, a lot of the experiences that I had happened at night. And so I kind of learned like in order for me to be engaged and to be in this moment, I need the lights to be on, or it needs to be happening during the day so my body can feel safe and I know exactly what's happening. For some survivors, it's communicating what's going to happen. In the movies, they're just like, they just get into it and, they're in the moment. Like sometimes that can feel really unsafe. Like sometimes like they would like to know what the next step is going to happen. So then that way they can feel like, okay, I know it's going to happen. And my body I'm breathing, I'm in the moment, and other times it's also, what do I focus on? Like, I don't even know what to focus on because I'm so used to floating off into midair or not being there. Like then, teaching them like how to focus on your sensations, like, what's happening. What does your skin feel like? What does it taste like? What does it smell like? Really cluing in on what's going on in your body, and also take the pressure off. It doesn't always have to be like, oh, we're going to go do the deed and then it's going to go to orgasm central. Like, no, why don't you do activities where it doesn't lead to that? Why don't we just like sit and watch a movie? Why don't we just cuddle? Why don't we just, maybe it's a bath. Maybe let's take a bath together. Where does it lead to that? Because that's another thing where people get, survivors can feel activated, like, oh, if I do any sort of physical connection, then that means it's going to lead to sex, and I don't want to have sex. And so you start off small, and then also what can build trust is co-regulating together. Like, I know that can be in such an intimate thing, like, hey, just leave me alone. I'm gonna go do my thing. But like how cool would it be for you guys to like co-regulate together? Like, how vulnerable and awesome is that, right? And then I think with physical intimacy, plan ahead, like, hey, what are we doing here? What's the plan? It's not a boardroom meeting, just like, hey, what are we doing? And then communicating during, and then debrief afterwards, like, how was that? Was that comfortable for you? Was that safe for you? And so, yeah, those are my toolbox.
So much of that, and checking in with each other, normalize talking, normalize making mistakes. We will, if we're too scared of saying the wrong thing, we end up not having conversation at all. So we can try things, we might misstep, we might accidentally kind of infringe on somebody else's boundary, and we can apologize, we can make amends. So we can have this conversation, we can give each other an out. It's okay to tell me no, right? Just to say that outright, because sometimes the way that we were socialized growing up, it wasn't okay to say no. Like, you can tell me to stop, you can tell me to slow down, we can stop, we can do something else, that is all okay. And trust isn't built by these grand sweeping gestures. Trust is built from all the tiny everyday gestures that really in the moment aren't so tiny. Trust gets built when we say, hey, I need to slow this down for a bit, and then you do. And this is how we can build trust, build comfort over time. And not just in matters of sex. Something that we've often used as an icebreaker is as an opening question, like, what opens you up, what shuts you down? Right? What is something that helps you engage further in a conversation? What leads you to say, like, nope, I am out of this discussion? So what helps us to stay connected and stay engaged rather than dissociate, wander away mentally, or just leave physically? What helps us to stay in and engaged and talking, and just all the little ways that we show up with each other. And that is how we build trust over time.
Just definitely want to echo what both of y'all said. I don't think I could add anything to it. A lot of honesty, right? Respect and just communication, and being open, right, with that partner to build that trust and intimacy.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Appreciate everyone taking the time and being so vulnerable and open, talking about really these important topics. And so with that, I'm going to wrap up. Thank you everyone for tuning in to our third annual Survivor Summit, Asian Mental Health Project. This event is sponsored by Every Voice Coalition. You can follow them on Instagram at Every Voice Coalition. Follow our amazing speakers and panelists. You can find all of this information on our Instagram, Asian Mental Health Project. And that'll be it. Thank you so much, everyone. I hope you have an amazing day, and thanks for your time again.